All right, today we are cackling one of the biggest, most world-changing events in all of history, the First World War. And it all starts with a huge question. I mean, how does a single gunshot in a city you've probably never heard of kick off a global war that kills millions of people and literally topples empires? It sounds impossible, right? Well, let's get into it. So to understand the explosion, you've got to understand what was ready to explode. And the best way to picture Europe back in 1914 is as one giant powder keg. It was just jam-packed with all this dangerous tension and rivalry that had been building up for years. All it needed was a single match. So what exactly was in that powder keg? Well, historians usually point to four big reasons that things got so tense. And a simple way to remember them is with the acronym MAIN. That's for militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. First up, M for militarism. You know, this was basically a massive arms race. All across Europe, countries were pouring tons of money into building bigger armies and navies. The most famous example, the naval race between Great Britain and Germany. When Britain launched this brand new, game-changing warship, the HMS Dreadnought, it instantly made every other battleship in the world totally obsolete. Germany, of course, scrambled to catch up, and all this did was create this atmosphere of, well, paranoia and suspicion. Next, A for alliances. To feel safe, all the big European nations started forming these complicated teams with secret promises to defend each other. The whole idea was that these powerful groups would be too intimidating to attack, right? It was supposed to keep the peace. But the big problem was it created a tripwire. An attack on just one country could now force all of its allies to jump into the fight, whether they wanted to or not. And here were the two main teams. On one side, you had the Triple Entente. That's Great Britain, France, and Russia. And on the other side, the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. You can already see how a small fight between, say, Austria-Hungary and Russia could suddenly pull everyone else in. The third ingredient, I for imperialism. Okay, so the major European powers were in this fierce race to build giant global empires. They were scrambling all over Africa and Asia, trying to grab colonies for resources, for power, and just for bragging rights. This global land grab created all kinds of friction, especially because a newly powerful Germany felt like it deserved its own place in the sun and started challenging the older empires like Britain and France. And finally, N for nationalism. This is that intense feeling that your own country is the absolute best, and it often came with a pretty serious dislike for your neighbors. In France, for example, people were still furious about losing a war to Germany years earlier and wanted revenge. Meanwhile, over in the Balkans, in southeastern Europe, different ethnic groups like the Serbs were dreaming of breaking away from the huge Austro-Hungarian Empire to form their own independent countries. So, there you have it. The powder keg was full. It was primed. It was ready to blow. All it needed was that one little spark. And that spark came on a sunny morning in a city called Sarajevo. On June 28, 1914, the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was visiting Sarajevo with his wife, Sophie. While they were driving through the city, a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip shot and killed them both. For Austria-Hungary, this was it. This was the perfect excuse they've been looking for. They blamed the entire country of Serbia for stirring up trouble in their empire, and now they finally had a reason to crush them. Now, the assassination didn't cause a world war overnight. Nope. Instead, it kicked off an entire month of threats, bluffs, and failed deals that sent the whole situation spiraling out of control. This whole period is known as the July Crisis. For a month, leaders were firing off telegrams to each other. Austria-Hungary gave Serbia this brutal ultimatum, basically a list of demands that was so harsh it was designed to be rejected. Serbia actually agreed to most of it, but it just wasn't enough. The countdown to war was on. And this is where that tripwire system went off and the dominoes started to fall, one by one. On July 28th, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. So Russia, who saw itself as Serbia's protector, started mobilizing its huge army. Then Germany, seeing its rival Russia getting ready to fight, declared war on Russia. Germany's plan to beat France quickly was to go around their defenses by invading neutral Belgium. And that right there was a huge mistake. Britain had a treaty promising to protect Belgium, and so, on August 4th, it declared war on Germany. The powder keg had officially exploded. So, with all the major powers now at war, the explosion wasn't just big, it was a totally new kind of conflict, something the world had never ever seen before. Think about it. Previous wars were fought with horses and single-shot rifles. World War I was the first industrial war. The same factories that used to make cars and farm equipment were now pumping out millions upon millions of artillery shells and bullets. It led to destruction on a scale that was just unimaginable. And just look at the terrifying technology that defined this war. You had rapid-fire machine guns that made charging across open ground an absolute suicide mission, poison gas that would choke soldiers in the trenches. They even introduced armored tanks to try and break through the lines, and airplanes took warfare to the sky for the very first time. All this new tech just made the war incredibly, brutally deadly. And because of this industrial scale, the war became what we now call a total war. And what that means is, it wasn't just a fight between armies anymore, it was a fight between entire societies. Every single part of a nation, every person, every resource had to be mobilized for the war effort. Back on the home front, life was completely turned upside down. With millions of men fighting, women entered the workforce in record numbers, many building weapons in dangerous factories. Governments started rationing everything, from bread and butter to coal for heat. And countries used powerful propaganda posters to keep everyone's spirits up and to paint the enemy as inhuman monsters. Suddenly, the line between soldier and civilian was getting very, very blurred. And make no mistake, this really was a world war. The giant British and French empires brought in soldiers from all over the globe, from Canada, Australia, India, and across Africa. Even Japan joined the fight in Asia. And then, in 1917, the United States jumped in, which really tipped the balance of power for good. By the time the guns finally fell silent in 1918, the world was almost unrecognizable. Four enormous, ancient empires, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, and the Ottoman empires, were just gone. They had completely collapsed into dust, and the map of Europe and the Middle East had to be totally redrawn. The Great War was supposed to be the war to end all wars. We all know now that it wasn't. It changed everything: how we fight, how we live, how we see the world. And it leaves us with a really important question. Knowing how it all happened back then, what are the tensions, the rivalries, and the alliances that might be packing the powder kegs of our own time?